no one is above the law. The people have had enough. We will root out the criminals and expose them all. We're fighting to expose the criminal element in Texas. Our investigation in the Brazoria County's justice system has just begun.
And now your host, Kevin Henry.
Welcome back to the Kevin Henry Podcast, and what a week it's been. You, our viewers, made our first show a real success. You took your knowledge and frustrations and went out and voted no to the BISD $167 million school bond scam. I'd also like to thank Jeff Mashburn for being our very first guest on the show and sharing his knowledge about what these school bond scams mean to your property values. I'd like to have Jeff on next month to explain the energy savings contract scams and the waste of taxpayers' money. Should be a real eye-opener. And now for a word from our sponsors. Looking for real coverage from real people? Whether it's your home, car, or business, go see Landra Olson's team at Farmers Insurance in West Columbia, Texas, where hometown service meets top-rated protection. Call Landra at 979-345-4479 today. Spring's here. It's time to get those flower beds and gardens in shape. Rifles Feed and Supply in Brazoria has soil, mulch, and everything you need to make your yard pop. Plus, the best feed and supplies for your animals. So call Rifles at 979-798-2909. Fentanyl is taking our loved ones' lives every day, but knowledge can save them. Travis's Voice is dedicated to raising awareness, educating communities, and preventing future tragedies. To learn more, go to travis'svoice.org.
I mean, y'all didn't think I was gonna let this go quiet, did you? Y'all thought I was gonna sweep this shit under the rug? Thought that I was just gonna walk away, did you? No. Do you understand the rarity and the quality of the things I'm getting ready to talk about to the world in regards to my experience in CPS? Being beaten, raped, abused, and neglected all the time. Males, females, residents, staff, it doesn't matter. For over 10 years of my childhood, while they kept me doped up on over 4 highly controlled substances at any given time, 6 mental health disorders in which I have not taken a pill for in 15 years. As I exposed the system, telling the truth and nothing but the truth about my experience, I'm calling out the state of Texas, and I'm calling out Child Protective Services. I'm willing to bet by now that I have CPS and the state of Texas tuned into this mother statement that I'm about to make. Oh, you seem to be a little confused. Okay. Well, let me introduce myself. My name is Travis Reed, and y'all took me from my parents in the early 90s. Put me into an emergency shelter downtown with my brother, where me and my brother became orphan wards of the state in the custody of CPS, Child Protected Services. Beaten, raped, abused, and neglected. And the fact I'm not dead or in the penitentiary is a miracle. And the fact that I'm not broken-hearted and broken-spirited anymore is a miracle. Your protection didn't mean shit. Your custody didn't mean shit when I was getting raped by grown men and grown teenagers.
What you just saw there was fiery TikToks from Travis Reed calling out years of abuse at the hands of a sexual predator, and the systemic failures of the Brazoria County judicial system and district attorney's office. What you will hear will disturb and shock you, but we believe it's important to shine a light and defeat the evil here and now. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our guest, Travis Reed. Welcome to the show, Travis. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Travis, tell us where you grew up and what your home life was like as a child.
Well, me and my brother are about 18 months apart, and we lived the the first 8 years of our life with our parents. And throughout that time, our mom spent most of her time dealing with my dad and handling my dad because he was a Purple Heart veteran from the Vietnam War and he was paralyzed. So he couldn't jump up and just be a dad, like, and correct us on site or whatever. We pretty much ran wild, and had a pretty normal household other than him, drinking a lot and doing drugs and stuff like that and yelling and throwing stuff in the house. He never hit me and my brother or nothing like that.
He was in a wheelchair?
Yeah, and he was in a wheelchair, confined to that. Eventually moved out of Houston and went to Santa Fe, to the country, got us a couple of BB guns. I mean, we were doing things like shooting the neighbor's horse. We were 4 and 6 years old. Shooting the neighbor's horse, throwing shingles in the neighbor's pool, set the garage on fire, just because we were just we just did our own thing because mom was busy. Like, it was just the way it was. And there was a BB gun incident that ultimately led to me and my brother being taken away permanently. When my brother got struck in the back of the head with a BB, there was tug of war between my dad and my brother, and it just so happened to go off.
And so at this point, you were placed into CPS care?
Yes, we got sent to school the next day, and the big issue wasn't that there was a incident with a BB in the head. It was the neglect to take him to the hospital. So sent us to school. My brother bragged about being shot in the head because my father got shot in the head in Vietnam with a 7.62 round from an AK. We went home and actually went back to school the next day. My brother, that's when they actually checked and verified because he started telling the same story again. So we didn't go home that second night.
Can you tell us about your care in the CPS system?
Things, possibly could have been a little chaotic until I was 8. But when I went in the system, I realized how life can actually become. And that's when beatings, acts of physical violence, kids, corrupt staff members, just being hit, beat, restrained with excessive force, which when you have your body folded up in your back and you're being sat on by a 200, 300-pound grown person, it's very, very, very painful. So stuff like that, and alongside the molestations and the sexual activity that occurred, which was primarily amongst older teenagers and younger boys, because they would house 5-year-olds in the same place as 17-year-olds, and a lot of shelters were set up like that in the 90s.
So you were in care of the CPS system for 3 years, roughly?
A good 3 years, and given that me and my brother's parents' rights were terminated and there was zero chance for contact and zero chance for us to go home, we had been approached by our caseworker about the option of getting adopted. We had turned down for a couple of years, I imagine, but eventually we're like, we have to get out of here because we just keep going. I mean, 2 or 3 placements a year. A lot of it was because of behavior, and my brother suffered a lot because I was younger and a lot more hyper, a lot more vocal and outspoken and active participant of.
So they would just move you to another home.
Right. My brother stayed with his nose in a book the entire time in CPS. I ran around and got into shit stuff.
So at age 11, you were introduced to Barry Griggs.
Yes.
He was a football coach and a teacher.
Mark. Yes.
Okay. So can you bring us back to that time in your mind?
Yeah, so we're in the system. We're in Houston, Texas. We get the first person that looks at us to get adopted, our caseworker told us, was a high school football coach and a teacher. So we're thinking, hey, that's pretty cool. That's pretty lit, So let's explore the option. So we went on a few weekend visits over the course of X amount of time, whether it be weeks or months. It didn't take long for us to realize that the more we went to that house, the less we wanted to go back to the system.
So your first impressions of Mr. Griggs was fantastic.
Outstanding citizen. I mean, it would have been a great father figure, a great leader, a great guide for us. And based on what everything looked like, how everything was set up for us to experience, which was a golden opportunity.
So you got to play sports and ride bikes.
Yes.
And
oh, man. Go to NFL games, college bowl games. He was a football coach. So we went to coaching clinics. We went to after parties. I was a ball boy for 4 years.
Yeah. So how soon after the adoption did things turn south?
Everything was normal for the visits. After it was finalized, the spankings were initiated immediately. And of course, we knew he had the legal right to. And coming from a place where we were hit in the mouth and the face with fists and just beat on and beat up and stuff and abused and bullied and stuff like that, it was, I'll take these spankings. Hell, give me a spanking every day, you know? Like, I mean, that's how I'm thinking at the time, you know? So,
But
like I
said, it beats going back into the system.
it beats going back in the system. Now, if you start, and if you slowly fast forward over the course of 6 months to a year to the 2-year mark, which would be the halfway marker of the adoption, when things, like, over that time, they got so bad, by the end of the 2 years, went from a normal lick, swat with a belt, clothed, to being unclothed, hit with extension cords, pull sticks, hangers, belts. He would spank our hands and feet with items and objects.
So it was more than punishment. It was abuse.
It was a sick and twisted individual fulfilling an inner desire of darkness, of demonic devilness.
How did Mr. Griggs use his position as a teacher and a coach to hide what was going on behind closed doors?
It's like you don't rob a bank at nighttime, right? You do it in broad daylight.
So you're saying just because he was a teacher and a coach,
I think that
nobody was suspect.
The more active that a predator is in a community, the less noticeable he is going to be.
So he was using his position to hide what was going on.
From my personal experience as a victim and at that time going through these things, I could see how blind people were.
Would he ever tell you, if you tell anybody, you're going to go back to the home?
You know what's funny about that is, no. He would say other things that were just weird or nasty.
Take us back to the time when you were first removed from the home and what incident happened. And I think you were saying it was something at the school.
Right. So at the end of the first 2 years of the adoption, about halfway through, I'm sent to school. That week I had taken on enough beatings that I could have auditioned for a Jesus film, because my lower back, my butt, and my thighs had whelps, minor lacerations, cuts, bruises, blacking, and purple and redness, and blood whelps. Now, I went to class. I had gotten in trouble, which happened often. So, and she said, I'm going to email Griggs, so go out in the hallway. And I said, please don't. She said, why? I said, come out here, I'll show you. So she came out in the hallway, and all I did was turn around and lift up my shirt, and she was able to see about 15% of what I was describing. The rest was shown whenever they took me to the nurse's office to see what the rest of it looked like. And they wound up taking pictures, and we didn't go home to Griggs that day. We immediately went to Jaeger homes in Galveston, where we had spent weeks, possibly low-end months, 1 or 2 months maybe, for an investigation. During that time at the Jaeger homes, we had experienced worse things than we had experienced when we were in that shelter 5 years or 7 years prior. So we had to get together and make a decision.
Can you elaborate a little bit on what you experienced at the Jaeger homes?
I know there was I was 12 or 13, and there was a kid who was 16 or 17. His name was Renee, and he was, my first few weeks, just running around the facility, punch me in the arm, punch me in the stomach. He would just trip me, throw me into a wall, just, these things like this, and then I could always take a beating. I could always take a hit. But when it came down to the sexual things, that's when I really became uncomfortable and out of my skin. I was really doing things that I didn't want to do, and really things I didn't like to do. And it was just as simple as him grabbing his stuff and swinging it around and just bringing it closer to me that drew the line. And it's like, you know what? I'd rather have this, at least know I'm going to be. I had to go back. We had to decide, weigh our options. Go back to Griggs where I'm getting beat, or do we stay in the system where I'm going to get beat by random people daily and have to experience sexual activity with random people daily?
So you, at a young age, had to make a decision between bad or worse.
Yes.
And you and your brother collectively got together.
We talked our way through that investigation, and they took us and dropped us right back off into Griggs' hands.
Can you tell us when you actually saw Griggs for the first time, that experience, when you were going back home with him?
When we were getting adopted, and it was all smiles and stuff, I will never forget the day. My brother most likely will never forget the day that our caseworker, she had our hands. She was walking us down the hallway. It was the longest hallway I have ever walked down in my life when we were getting released back to his custody. Because the whole time we're walking down that hallway, he's got this look in his eyes like, I'm going to murder you, mother kids. I'm going to kill you. I'm going to kill you.
And so they didn't pick up on that at all when they're handing y'all back over to
He looked just like this. His head was tilted to the side. He was gritting his teeth. His eyes were piercing through our souls. And he was not happy.
When you were placed back into custody with Griggs, the atmosphere was pretty hostile at that point, it sounds like. How did the sexual molestation start with Griggs? How soon after?
Well, I mean, the first night, I mean, he beat the living shit out of me. Don't know with what. I don't know how long. I don't have any memory of it. I just know that it happened for sure multiple times within the first couple of weeks. And at the end of one of them, he slid his hand across my thigh and asked me, did that hurt? And he said, well, what do you want to do? You want to continue getting a spanking, as he called it? Or do you want to do this? Or do you want to do touching, feeling, rubbing, whatever?
So he started grooming you.
He started grooming me, petting me like a dog, like a puppy.
And you said in our pre-interview that he dyed your hair blonde.
The entire time I was with him,
he kept your hair blonde.
Kept my hair blonde. It's in my face. It's in my yearbook photos at West Columbia or Charlie Brown Intermediate. It's in my pictures at Clute Intermediate, Lake Jackson Intermediate, all of them.
So from the time he started grooming you, how soon after did it actually physically start, like the penetration?
So I say when we got released back to his custody, sexual stuff started for the first time within that first couple of weeks to a month. And then it seemed like I was getting beat a good two or three times, because now like the beatings were more intense and they were happening more often and more frequent. So he would use that as leverage or a platform to kind of get me to
have
to
this,
manipulate.
or you can have this.
Yes, and I could take, like I said, for a 13-year-old, it would make half the people cry, and it would make the other half proud that I was that strong.
Can you take us to the time when you felt that he violated you 100% and that this is not normal?
Yep. He was the first. Usually when we went to like vacationing in the Smoky Mountains or to travel for an NFL game or a college bowl game, we would both go. But this was the first time he took me without my brother. And we were in a hotel room, and he, for the first time I laid eyes on this in my life at 13, was a bag of sex toys and lubrication. And I remember specifically what the bottle of lube said, anal ease, and it burned.
What was your breaking point? Can you take us to that?
I could only handle, so the sexual stuff took over for the last 2 years, and I was getting beat less, but still getting beat on. And one night, and this is what they put in the Facts newspaper in 2003, I think, or 4, was that he tied Brazos coach Adai's adopted son to bed, beats and molests him, which he tied me by all 4 limbs, naked on my stomach and just the backside, and I had to lay still for each hit. I wasn't allowed. Squirming made it worse. I had to lay there and take it. And it was just.
And this was with extension cords and hangers and belts.
Yeah. He never took that from me. He never took that from me, like in that sense. He did, but he didn't. It was more like he eased into it over years and years and stuff. But I think because I was really reserved with this and really reserved with this, everything else I was okay with because it was just basic stuff. I guess he started he can only deal with that for a couple of years. I wasn't being submissive with those things like he liked. And I noticed the beatings got worse and worse and worse. So that's whenever I guess he figured, you know what, I'm really going to beat him into submission now. So after a good hours, I mean, easily I felt like I was tied to that bed for hours. It could have been a half hour, could have been 20 minutes, could be actually 3 hours. It felt like forever. And he untied me because I had finally given in. I'm like, we can do anything. We can do whatever you want at this point. So my brother, at this point, my brother's 16. He's growing up a little bit. He's got a little facial hair coming in. You know, so he goes in there to try to fight Griggs off for the first time in 4 years. My brother and Griggs are actually scuffling, like they're going at it. My brother's trying to fight for me. And they knock over a lamp in the process. And a pile of clothing catches on fire. So Griggs has no choice but to tend to the fire. Got to contain this event, right? Got to keep.
So there's a fire broke out in the house
for sure, 100%. Clothing, but I don't think it turned into like what they call, I guess, a working fire or anything like that. Nothing crazy. Fire department wasn't called. He contained it. Right. But during that short amount of time it took him to contain it, we were gone. We ran. You broke out. We ran down, I think, maybe to the Palms Apartments or a house nearby.
But you broke out of the house while he was tending to the fire.
Yep. We were living on Basswood in Lake Jackson.
Hold that thought. We'll be right back. I need a word from the sponsors. Thank you so much.
And now, a word from our sponsors.
Need a barn that's built to last and made right here in Texas? Call Stuckey Barns in Brazoria County, where quality craftsmanship meets rugged durability. From custom barns to metal buildings, they bring your vision to life with Texas pride and hometown service. Call today, 979-236-7771. Stuckey Barns, built strong, built local, built for Texas. Looking for bold, high-quality ink? Seven Souls Tattoo Studio has you covered, literally. Located at 20 Circle Way in Lake Jackson, they're dedicated to cleanliness, professionalism, and unforgettable tattoo experiences. Their expert artists guide you through the entire process, ensuring your vision comes to life with precision and creativity. Need a cover-up? No problem. They specialize in turning old ink into stunning new art. Call today, 979-871-9115, or stop by Seven Souls Tattoo Parlor today, where precision meets perfection and every tattoo tells a story. Boat season's here. Is your ride ready? At Liquid Rides in Brazoria, we don't just service boats, we elevate them. From certified marine repairs to full engine builds, our expert mechanics are fully certified and factory trained. We're your trusted Mercury Marine and PCM dealer, keeping your boat running smooth all year long. And it doesn't stop at the water. We build custom stereo systems for your boat, vehicle, Jeep, and side-by-side that'll blow the roof off and turn heads anywhere you go. From high-performance marine work, electronics and rigging, to next-level audio installs, Liquid Rods is the Gulf Coast go-to for everything loud, clean, and dialed in. Call today, 979-798-0123. Liquid Rides, custom audio, certified performance, built in Texas.
And now, back to the Kevin Henry Podcast.
And we're back. Thank you to our sponsors for allowing us to share these stories. Travis, where we left off is you had just escaped from Griggs's house, you and your brother, after a small fire had started over a lamp being knocked over while you were being sexually abused. What happened when you got out of the house?
Well, it was late at night. We were on Basswood and Lake Jackson, and we ran however long it is, maybe a mile. We ran about halfway to the police station. It was in a house in the neighborhood at my brother's friend's house, and Lake Jackson PD came, took us to the police station.
So the parents of that kid called
Right.
PD? Okay.
Right. Because it was so late at night, I think they laid us straight to bed. We slept on the floor of the Lake Jackson police station.
So while you're in care of Lake Jackson Police Station, you slept on the floor. You told them, they asked you to get your statement, your story, what happened.
I told them everything that had occurred from the time we were released back to his custody and to the time to that moment.
And you had mentioned being put on a polygraph examination, or going through a polygraph examination. So that is, you can call pretty much any polygraph examiner in the country, and they will tell you that you are not supposed to put sexual assault victims on a polygraph because they will fail because of the trauma. And they put you on one anyways?
Yeah, and it's crazy that you mentioned that, because now looking back in that room with the chief of police, Sweeney, I remember that I could barely breathe. I mean, I was so tense and so locked up just from the nature of the questions being asked in regards to, and that's the first time in my life I had heard the words anal penetration or oral penetration. I knew what it meant, and I said yes. I remember saying yes to those things. Like, I knew what they meant, but there were, I guess, maybe a combination of the trauma and the foreign terminology being used and the environment. I guess everything through, like, maybe that's what you were saying, right?
Yeah. So yeah, most polygraph examiners, I would hope all of them would not put sexual assault victims on the machine because high chances of failing because of the trauma. So the grand jury indicts Griggs on aggravated assault of a minor, correct?
Yeah, just a physical assault.
So the grand jury indicts him, and the DA's office offered him a plea deal of injury to a child, which makes it where he does not have to register as a sex offender at that point if he accepts this plea deal. So you have a monster being offered a plea deal of a much lesser crime where he doesn't have to register, and he can go out and and victimize.
Right.
God knows how many people he victimized from just that decision alone, allowing him to plead down. What was your thoughts when you knew he walked on that, as far as him not receiving the justice that he deserved?
Well, I found out late November of 2022, and that's when I went to the courthouse and made that video.
Close to 15 years later, or
yeah,
roughly?
I just found out in recent years.
Wow.
And that's what triggered me to want to...
The TikToks that we saw at the beginning of the show. Okay. What brought you to that breaking point of you going out and actually being vocal about this? I mean, I know you've lived a hard life with all this trauma. What was the one thing that made you go pretty much live on TikTok and get viral with your videos?
Well, once God came into the picture at 27 years of age, I had already been living life for 10 years out of the system, and I was failing miserably. Without God, I had failed my attempt in the military. I failed attempts at college. I failed in Dow Chemical. And I had a lot of failures during that time. When I started to reach out to God and actually talk about these problems, God sat right there on my shoulder and he carried me. And I talked about it for 7 years. And then he said, "Doof, make a video. Now that you've been talking to people for 7 years, now I want you to tell the world, show the world the courage and the strength and the power you have developed through facing these demons and facing these giants of the past."
So your faith is what drug you through this.
The only thing that drug me through this, or I'd be a felon, I'd be dead, just another number and statistic, because that's where a large majority of foster kids who age out of the system by the time they're 21, you'd be surprised how many die or go to prison. You'd be shocked.
Can you elaborate on your faith a little bit? Can you tell us how you found the Lord and what happened?
I found the Lord at 3 Bridges, driving 65 miles an hour after being awake for 14 days on methamphetamines. And he slammed my car into the side of that bridge because I fell asleep. And when I woke up and just see the little bit of damage, just a scratch along the side of the vehicle, when I felt like King Kong picked up that car and slammed it into a brick wall and concaved half of the vehicle in, I'm wondering how the vehicle's not smushed into the center. But I'm veering back onto the road. I wake up, and then my life changed from that point forward. And I didn't get sober right away. It took a couple of years, but I didn't lose my faith. And eventually, I got the gift. I got the blessing at the end, the miracle. Don't give up before the miracle happens.
Right. So you started following the Holy Spirit and listening to the Holy Spirit talk to you, and you started being guided spiritually to clean yourself up, to get out of the trouble that you were in. Yeah. Because at some point, were you blaming yourself for all this stuff that happened, and then you finally
I was 27.
Until you were 27-year-old?
Yes.
You blamed yourself that whole time.
The first time I ever talked about this story was in Central Texas Treatment Center. I was there for 9 months, and that's the first time I ever spoke on it. I couldn't even talk without shaking and crying at the lip. Now I've made such an advancement, and my tears earlier, purely tears of joy. Those are not broken and sad tears. Those are tears of joy, crying because I don't have to go through that stuff anymore, ever again.
So you're spiritually led, you're a recovering addict, you're a recovering sexual assault victim as a child. That's a very impressive story, and I love hearing that the Lord pulled you out of this, that your Christianity is what brought you out of the darkness.
Kevin, I really feel like who lives such an experience and then goes about their life like nothing happens? Somebody who's trying to forget, somebody who's trying to act like, who's not equipped to deal with it, right?
Right.
And after this much time with God, we're talking 10 years getting closer to God, 10 years of practicing my walk, getting better with my walk and my faith, and 10 years of talking about these horrific nightmares have led me to one place. I could easily spend the rest of my life talking about this just to help the next person develop a small amount of strength and courage. If I can make one video that reaches 1 million people but sparks a fire inside of one of them, I accomplished my goal. Because if you can just start a fire, it's all about starting a fire. All I need to do is spark a light inside of somebody, and then the rest will unfold for them. And I want to be that vessel.
So that brings me back to something you just touched on. Would you find most child sexual assault victims find themselves turn into drugs and the criminal life on the streets?
Yeah, I'd say that they're either... Maybe, who knows, could be 15%, 20%, I imagine, are going to become a product of their environment. So they're going to turn into sex offenders. That's probably a strong reality. The other bit is going to medicate so heavily, and of that group, maybe half will function in that light. The other half is going to be strongly faced with the penitentiary or the tombstone on a daily basis.
So the chances are pretty bleak for the victims of child sexual assault.
Very strong, very solid, very likely. Without God, for sure.
Travis, that's very admirable what you've been able to accomplish after all the adversity that you faced. You had mentioned something about taking on big pharma. Can you elaborate on that?
Amongst the total of 6 highly controlled substances that the system had me on as a kid, one of them in particularly, which I believe was for like schizophrenia, bipolar, and stuff like that, was Risperdal. A couple of things came from that. By the time I was 15, I started developing a mass that was a hard knot underneath my left breast. And over the course of 5 years until I was 20, it developed into a golf ball sized mass that was extremely hard. Well, I really wanted to join the military. So in order to do that, I had to have it surgically removed, and I did. Not shortly after that, I seen an ad about Risperdal and gynecomastia, and next thing you know, I decided that I was going to try to go after compensation. But what I didn't realize was that I was also, which I did sue Johnson & Johnson, and I got a settlement for that, for the psychiatric drug causing physical injury. And at the same time, that became evidence for my future lawsuit that will be going on against the state of Texas and or CPS.
So you're not a stranger to fighting back for sure.
Not at all.
You fought back your predator, you fought back big pharma, and you're not done yet.
It's the only reason I'm still free and still alive and can vote and buy guns. And
Travis, you found out that Griggs was convicted of crimes in Kentucky. Can you tell us how you found that out?
well, a quick backstory. All my life, from the time I got taken from Griggs up until about the age of 34, a few years ago, I was under the impression that he was a convicted sex offender for what he did to me. September or November of 2022, I discovered that he was only convicted for physically injuring me, and they let him walk on the sexual stuff. And that is what set me off to make my video at the courthouse, because they let it go, but I'm not.
But you found that he got busted in Kentucky, right?
Yeah, 2019, he got busted on a crime, and he is now a registered sex offender because of it. But he is on a unsupervised registry, and it's only for 20 years. So this man will be unsupervised until he's off, and then he will be completely off the radar again. So,
And I remember reading on this after you told me about it, but I believe he was convicted of child pornography on his computer for depicting children under the age of 13 years old.
yes.
So it basically corroborates what you were saying the whole time,
Yes.
and what our Brazoria County District
Right.
Attorney's Office allowed this monster to plead down on
Exactly.
injury to a child
Exactly.
instead of aggravated assault to a child, which is hideous. That's insane that they allowed this man to walk for 15 more years before the state of Kentucky got involved and busted him and made him register as a sex offender.
But I want the people to know that just because he got caught with pictures of portraying sexual images of a minor, I believe, that's probably connected to another event. For instance, for the last 2 years of the adoption, I sat in his lap every single morning and watched child porn on .com. So he was doing it then, but he also had a child in his lap.
That's absolutely terrifying that our district attorney's office let this man continue to do that for 15 years. Travis, if you had one request for one reform to be made in the state of Texas, what would that be?
Well, especially when it comes to women and children, or just a victim in general, if somebody's being sexually violated or assaulted, that the district attorney and the state needs to prosecute that individual to the fullest extent of the law, or at least make sure they cover the conviction for all crimes committed in that specific situation.
And not allow them to plead down.
Exactly.
Allowing them to plead down allows these monsters to continue to walk the streets without registering as a sex offender. So they can continue to do this, and nobody will know that they're actually monsters living next door to them. So after hearing this story, I'm sure the listeners are pretty angry about everything that you've gone through as a child. and what you've had to deal with as an adult from that trauma. What do you want the listeners to take away from this story? And do you have any words of wisdom for other victims that may be listening right now?
I do. If something happens to you, abuse, whether it be physical or sexual, don't be afraid to reach out to somebody and talk about it, because you're going to discover that the more you talk about it, the more it's going to lose its power over you. And then you're going to get to a certain place that you're going to see somebody walking through life and they're broken, and then you're going to want to tell them that, hey, I relate to you. You know, you didn't suffer alone. You know, lots of people have gone through the same thing, and you know, you get to expose violent, corrupt, and sick individuals. At the same time, you get to set yourself free, and then you get to become an example for somebody else who is suffering. There's people out there right now, and many of you, like I was, who is living day to day in just broken, sad, functioning and paying taxes, living their life, law-abiding citizens, or even not, but suffering. Could be on both sides of that coin. But just please reach out and just talk to somebody, and you'll be surprised where it goes, and you'll be grateful that you did it. You'll be glad.
And if we have listeners out there, we will put an email on the screen for them to reach out if they need help. If people wanted to get a hold of you or follow you on your socials, where can they do that at?
Travis Reed 713 is my TikTok handle, and that's all I have for now.
So Travis Reed 713.
Yes.
And we'll put that up for you, for the viewers to follow also. But Travis, I know this has been extremely difficult for you to discuss on camera in a setting like this. I appreciate you opening up to us. I truly believe that if we just have one person get help from watching or listening to this podcast, it was all worth it.
Yeah.
And it was all because of you being a man and standing up and saying, this did happen to me. It was not right, and I'm not going to be silenced. So kudos to you, Travis, for coming on this show and for explaining this horrific tragedy. I appreciate you for being here, and I hope to have you back on soon.
Certainly. Let's spark these fires inside of people.
Let's do it.
All right.
Thank you, Travis. Next week on the show, we will be pulling back the curtain on the Brazoria County District Attorney's Office and the grand jury. We have a whistleblower that sat on the grand jury and will be exposing how the District Attorney's Office steers the jury into the outcome that they want. See y'all soon.